Hi everyone and welcome to my presentation today. It's entitled A Study of Modern Foreign Language Student Teachers and Their Attitudes of Computer Assisted Language Learning. My name is Louise Hanna and I am a final year PhD researcher at Ulster University, and I am so delighted to be able to share my findings with you here all today. So looking at this presentation's contents, firstly I'm going to provide a quick overview in terms of the literature review and theoretical framework. I will explore my methodology, I will examine my data analysis. Following on from this, then I will provide a very quick overview of the research questions and my answers to these research questions, and then I will finally provide a summary and a conclusion to end this presentation. So the project overview. So really, what was my project? Well, really, it's an investigation of student teachers and their opinions or their thoughts towards computer-assisted language learning. Who took part? Well, I was lucky to have 60 student teachers or pre-service teachers across all UK jurisdictions, including England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So I was lucky to have 7 universities partaking, 3 in England, 2 in Scotland, 1 in Wales and 1 in Northern Ireland. Now this study actually was conducted during the academic year from September 2020 to June 2021, and the reason for this study was that it was purposefully designed in order to try and fill a gap in the research literature, as the cognitions of student teachers is underexplored. And how did I do this? Well, it was a mixed method study, and this involved therefore focus groups, questionnaires and interviews. So my literature review primarily took a real dedicated look at the different models of technology adoption that exist out there. Now there's many different theoretical frameworks to guide teachers towards using digital technologies, but there's not actually a specific one for student teachers and specifically around using call. So really I looked at a number of different models, including the theory of reasoned actions, the technology acceptance model, the United theory of acceptance and use of technology, and the model of personal computer utilization in order to really develop my own theoretical framework. This is my theoretical framework, the student-teacher call acceptance model, and in this there's 3 key conditions which dictate and guide student teachers to call adoption. So firstly, learning conditions, and this comprises of university education, school-led learning, self-directed learning and peer-assisted learning. And this is important because student teachers are distinct from their teacher counterparts because they are in fact enrolled on a programme of teaching and learning. Secondly, the attitude towards call, and this is so important because there's the perceived ease of call. So how easy or how complex do student teachers find call adoption, because that will actually influence their decision to adopt or reject call. Finally, the perceived usefulness of call as well as in part of the attitude to call section, and that's in terms of positive, negative and mixed perceptions of call. So the more likely that student teachers exhibit a positive attitude towards call, the more likely it is that they will choose to utilise it in their modern foreign language classroom. Then thirdly, there's the factors of influence, and these have been categorised as student teacher characteristics, so specific things about student teachers that actually decide whether they choose to accept call. Then contextual or geographic factors, and that actually shows that there is a contextual aspect of call usage depending on the location or the setting of student teachers. And then finally, learner-based variables. So student teachers are very mindful of how call is received in their modern foreign language classroom, and therefore they are very cognizant of the role of their pupils and learners. So those are the 3 key aspects that guide student teachers to call adoption, and that leads to their decision making, their behavioural intent if you will, whether they choose to use call. And then actually what their call usage is, so it can be high, moderate or low. Following on from this, then looking at their reflection. How did the experience of using call go? So they'll evaluate, they will reflect on it, and they will then use that learning for future classroom activities with or without call. Looking at the methodology then, there were a number of steps. First and foremost, it was absolutely vital to acquire ethical approval. So that was in line with Ulster University's ethical committee. Then following on from this was a pre-study, and that was really a mapping exercise and a pilot study that was undertaken with current in-service modern foreign language teachers. Looking at the primary study, I acquired participation from 7 different UK initial teacher education providers by firstly distributing a questionnaire to every single provider of modern foreign language is in the UK. So those programs that offered a 1-year postgraduate certificate in education, postgraduate diploma in education were asked to participate in a study to understand their tuition of call for student teachers, and it allowed them an opportunity to opt in, opt out of the wider study. So once I got my 7 providers, then I was able to engage with their student teachers, and this was primarily at the very beginning of their PGC PGD programme via a biodemographic questionnaire and a focus group. These were online during the COVID circumstances, and really it was an opportunity to acquire their understanding and their meaning and their views of call right as they're beginning and embarking on a programme of initial teacher education programme. Following on from this, then I engaged with the teacher educators of these programmes really to gain a snapshot understanding of how they feel about call in terms of their programme of teaching and learning in its inclusion of call as well. And then following on from this, the final stage was actually following up with those student teachers right at the end of their PGC PGD programme, just to understand what had changed for them, how they thought and felt about call now, how they process it, how their behaviours, whether they matched up to their actual initial expectations. So it was a nice opportunity to talk to them just as they were about to graduate from their initial teacher education programme. So the next step of the research journey was actually the data analysis, and this took 2 primary categories. First and foremost, there was the descriptive statistics, and this was really used with the questionnaire data that I had distributed to all IT providers across the UK, and it was also used with the biodemographic questionnaires to student teachers. But the primary mechanism of data analysis was actually thematic analysis, and this was used really to understand and get a real deep connection to the teacher educators in terms of their interview data, and also the student teachers relating to their focus groups at beginning and end of PGC PGD programmes. So really, what were my research questions? And we devised 4 research questions for this study. The first one was concerned with attitudinal change. So we followed up with student teachers not only at the beginning of their initial teacher education journeys, but also at the end. So I was trying to understand, had anything changed for them between the start and the end of their PGC, PGDE, PGD programme in terms of their thinking about call. Then the second research question was around factors affecting use. So what are the key issues driving student teachers towards using call, or what are the things that are maybe inhibiting its usage? Then the regional context was the third focus of my journey in terms of research questions, and really this was important because the study was being conducted across all 4 UK jurisdictions. So this study enabled an opportunity to try and understand whether there were specific local issues or regional considerations in call. And then finally, the fourth research question is concerned with further opportunities. So are there potential things that can help to advance call tuition in initial teacher education? And that is where the student teacher input was so vital to answering these 4 research questions. So looking on then at research question 1, as discussed previously, this was around attitudinal change. So what had changed for student teachers? Well, first and foremost, university education was so important for student teachers at the very beginning of their PGCE, PGDE, but it actually decreased. It became far less significant in follow-up focus groups. And with that, self-directed learning actually became the primary channel of call knowledge acquisition for student teachers at the end of initial teacher education. So there was an increased reliance on autonomous and independent learning for student teachers. As well as this, we saw that positive views on the whole actually reduced. So student teachers were very positive about the use of call at the beginning of their PGC, PGDE courses, but this actually was notably different in follow-up discussions. So in these final discussions, we noticed that positive views reduced by 28.97%, while at the same time, negative views of call actually increased by 1/4. And if we think about perceived ease of use, call actually became much less easy for student teachers at the end of their PGCE, PGDE programme compared to at its beginning. So looking at research question 2, and if we remember it's around the different factors, what are the key issues that are influencing student teachers to use call? And in this we saw that there were a number of key student teacher characteristics in terms of their workload, in terms of perceived pressure to use call, their placement school experiences, their own digital literacy, their confidence, their classroom management skills, how prepared they feel in future employment. So there were specific areas relating to student teachers that we found were very significant, and especially workload. Workload became far more important for student teachers at the end of their initial teacher education, whereby they recognised the effort and the time taken to orchestrate call in the modern foreign language classroom. As well as this, there were also learner-based variables. So we talked about the importance of these student-teacher characteristics when it comes to using call, but there are also important learner issues as well. So student teachers were very mindful about the digital access of their learners, the digital literacy, the feedback that they might receive from their learners, whether there were any sort of additional educational needs, the age of their learners and learning styles. So they're recognizing that they don't just use call to suit them, but very much have an increased focus in thinking about their pupils and the learners in the classroom. And then the third research question was concerned with some of the contextual issues. So we actually noticed that there were some important things to be mindful of. This research was conducted amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and each UK jurisdiction had a different mechanism in which to deal with the pandemic. Obviously, in all 4 regions of the UK, we have 4 different types of curricular frameworks, and that influenced their decision to adopt call. The influence of the local authorities was significant in England and Scotland. Teacher standards and professional standards were also commented upon by student teachers. There were specific issues in Wales in terms of HUB and the professional learning passport, which ultimately also motivated student teachers to use call. And then the final research question, an important one, was what further enhancements could initial teacher education providers do to really improve their tuition of call? And student teachers actually identified a lot of different things that could be implemented, but I actually looked at the most common. So the very common recommendations, and these were identified in at least 71% of all participating providers of initial teacher education. So some of the key issues were around providing explicit teacher-educator modelling, facilitating experiential learning on call, providing specific dedicated timetabled and scheduled time to call, improving confidence. So these student teachers participating were primarily digital natives. There were still issues with their confidence in call, improving enthusiasm, trying to promote the teacher-educator buy-in of call, increasing teacher-educator digital literacy, involving call specialists to come in to initial teacher education and really talk about how you can make best use of call, including call and student-teacher reflective practice, so important, but yet doesn't seem to be a part and parcel of all teacher education programs. Also providing potentially a subject knowledge enhancement course or a module on call, and teaching the nuts and bolts, so starting at the beginning. So really looking at the conclusion then. So looking at the first issue around student-teacher learning, there were 4 key ways in which student teachers learn about call: university education, school learning, self-directed learning, and peer-assisted learning. Overall, I identified 19 positive, 13 negative, and 5 mixed themes of call usefulness. Then there were also a number of factors of influence which were identified, and these were all categorised according to student-teacher characteristics, learner-based variables, and the regional or the contextual issues. And then finally, there were a number of recommendations which student teachers put forward to enhance their learning of call, and these have all been categorised according to their frequency. So thank you so much for listening and really taking the time to understand and hear my study. Today I've talked about the theoretical framework in terms of the models of technology adoption. I've also provided an overview of my own theoretical framework, I discussed my methodology, my data analysis, the research questions, and a real quick overview of their answers, and then I have closed with a conclusion. So thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time listening to the study, and if you would like to, please interact with me on the app. And it's lovely getting to share my research, and I feel very privileged to do so. Thank you and enjoy the conference.